Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about The Privilege. The Privileg is a German horror thriller that tells the story of Finn, a teenager who comes from a wealthy family and attends a prestigious private high school. Although his life seems ideal, he is plagued by nightmares related to the death of his older sister Anna and continues to suffer from mental illness long after it happened. Eventually, a series of supernatural events begin to take place, which leaves Finn questioning everything around him, so he teams up with his friends to try and solve the mystery while battling resistance at every turn from his family, leading him to uncover a conspiracy much bigger and deadlier than he could have imagined. This is one of those movies where I'm not really sure where my opinion lies. On one hand, it was presented well on a technical level, and it was suspenseful enough to keep watching to the end, but on the other hand, the confusing story and horror cliches kept me from being fully invested in it. The main character, Finn, is better than most protagonists would be in a typical horror film. Even though he's a bit bland in personality, he makes up for it with his tragic backstory, his persistent struggles with paranoia, and his determination to reveal the truth. Supporting characters are unfortunately dull by comparison. Finn's best friend Lena has nothing noteworthy about her other than that she's a lesbian, while Finn's crush Samira has the same weird smiley look on her face throughout the movie and sort of just tags along with Finn to do whatever, without asking questions. Their performances were competent enough, but these characters remain boring. This being said, Finn has enough stakes riding on him to make him an endearing character to root for. Combined with his pleasant demeanor toward just about every student at the school he attends, he becomes even more interesting as a character when the relationship he has with his family is explored in greater detail. His parents blow off a lot of Finn's concerns as superstition and saying that he's just imagining things, which further adds to Finn's frustration as increasingly disturbing events begin to unfold, such as when his twin sister Sophie gets sick and when other characters die off. There's a mystery aspect to the story that makes it much more interesting to watch as opposed to just seeing characters being killed off one by one like any other horror flick. Drip-feeding details of Finn's family life scene by scene and weaving it all into the conspiracy as it builds was a great way of developing his character while also making him important to the story. This also helps greatly with suspense as it develops. I found this movie to be much better suited as a thriller, with Finn and other characters seeing and hearing things that aren't there or being lulled into a false sense of security and a general sense of a cat and mouse game being played as Finn and his friends go on the run while carrying out their investigation. The horror elements are where this movie started to lose me. The movie begins with one of the most confusing opening sequences I've ever seen in a horror movie with no explanation given to events that precede, and ending with a cheesy scream sound effect that sounds like it belongs from 1952 instead of 2022. The movie also comes packed with its fair share of jump scares, something that I've never been a fan of. The worst part about them is that they rarely lead to anything serious happening to the characters. It just cheapens the tension of the moment, which in turn reduces excitement when something serious does actually happen to the characters. By far the most disappointing thing about the horror is the apparition which follows Finn throughout the story. Now, I do like the idea of this constant evil presence tormenting Finn and clouding his judgment as he tries to make sense of everything, but its potential in this area is completely wasted as it's little more than a screaming monster. For some reason, hearing it growl like some sort of animal made it hard for me to take it seriously, especially when it's discovered what that creature is supposed to be made of, and after that reveal is made, it's made more disappointing because it's disconnected from all the supernatural elements shown beforehand. The movie's main premise involves a blend of both scientific and supernatural topics, with things like fungi, black magic, drugs, and spirits all thrown together to appease the best of both worlds. While that sounds interesting in theory, it can't quite pull off the execution. The whole supernatural angle doesn't really gel with the science behind the conspiracy. The apparition is treated like a demon that needs to be removed from people by performing an exorcism, yet Finn also looks into its organic origins at the same time. The movie was always butting heads with itself over which of the two angles to present, so it ends up with an awkward presentation of both that never makes complete sense. Even the science by itself is confusing at times. For example, the drugs featured in this movie are lazily implemented as plot devices. I could never determine if they were meant to be medical or recreational in nature, as characters seem to be using them for different reasons all the time, and it was never consistent as to when characters would be affected by them. Despite how muddled and confusing the story was in this respect, there was still a watchability factor to it that kept me interested to the end. I think a lot of that was due to how well presented it was on a technical level. Now, this doesn't completely save its story from being rushed and incomplete, but it at least made it more fun to watch. Its electronic soundtrack definitely enhances the atmosphere where it counts, from being upbeat and peppy in the day to dark and brooding at night. The cinematography is excellent as well, with an overarching black shade fusing with blends of various colors, making every shot a piece of eye candy, all with stylish editing to boot. But as creative as these things can be, the predictable nature of the story does eventually get in the way of it. I knew who was responsible for Finn's hardships within half an hour or so of the movie starting, so even though the mystery behind their intentions was was engaging to try and figure out, knowing who was responsible hampered the excitement. Honestly, it would have still been enjoyable if the ending didn't turn out as ridiculous as it did. The reasoning behind the culprit's actions are poorly explained, and a half-baked plot twist toward the end fails at shocking its audience to any notable degree. Overall, The Privilege is a disappointingly average horror thriller that is entertaining in parts, but suffers due to its puzzling fusion of themes and cliched horror. If you like horror and thriller movies that have a supernatural aspect to them, you might enjoy this one to some extent, but it's probably just as likely that you'll walk away from this wanting more, and not in a good way. I thought about giving this movie a negative rating at first, but its interesting protagonist, thrill sequences, and absorbing technical presentation made it a somewhat entertaining experience, so in the end, I can't bring myself to hate on it that much. What did you think about this movie? Were you impressed by its unique presentation of horror, or was its story too baffling to follow along with? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of The Privilege. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the Korean romantic comedy, Love and Leashes. Bye bye!